The perfect smile is rarely a sign of peace. It is a carefully constructed camouflage, hiding the predator within the corporate herd. In the sterile corridors of power and ambition, survival relies heavily upon the unspoken signs, the micro-expressions most victims leave entirely unseen. Observe the manipulator silently approaching the unsuspecting prey. An interaction begins with a calculated gesture, presenting a cup of coffee as friendly bait. The psychological trap is set with simple movements. The corners of the mouth turn upward, simulating a human emotion that does not genuinely exist. This is known as the infamous dead smile, a biological lie where facial muscles contract, yet the eyes remain completely hollow, flat, and utterly dead. Genuine human warmth reaches the upper face area, creating subtle wrinkles around the eye muscles, a spontaneous physiological reaction that is entirely impossible to fake. But look closely at the observing corporate predator. The crimson tie contrasts with the stillness of an icy, calculating, unblinking stare that analyzes every weakness. The fake smile vanishes almost instantly without trace, dropping away faster than natural emotion dictates, revealing the chillingly calculated emptiness hidden underneath the friendly mask. Before a single word of greeting is exchanged, a quick vertical scan assesses the victim. An instinctual elevator look measuring vulnerability, status, and exploitable flaws. The unsuspecting target is weighed and instantly categorized, not as a colleague or fellow human, but strictly as an expendable asset to be drained completely. The victim responds with open vulnerability and relief, their shoulders relaxed and neck fully exposed, unknowingly stepping directly into a carefully laid psychological snare. A genuine smile is gratefully offered in return, a fatal mistake in this ruthless game, freely exposing their inner psychological defenses directly to the enemy. The predator subtly steps into their personal space, breaching the boundaries with engineered fake warmth, meticulously preparing the mental ground for future gaslighting and manipulation. Every nod and highly sympathetic tilt of the head is a strategic data-gathering covert operation, perfectly designed to weaponize your trust against you later. The coffee is accepted with blind and naive gratitude. The first invisible thread of control attaches, and the dark psychological hunt officially begins. The true danger begins before a single word is ever spoken. The predator's eyes perform a microscopic downward sweep, meticulously calculating the exact worth of the unsuspecting prey. This predatory assessment is commonly known as the elevator look, an ancient biological scanning protocol designed specifically to identify exploitable vulnerabilities hidden beneath the professional surface. Notice the subtle shift in the corporate hunter's rigid posture. The broad shoulders drop merely a fraction of an inch, simulating a completely fabricated sense of mutual relaxation. The naive target perceives this physical shift as genuine trust, completely unaware that their own ancient biological defense mechanisms are being systematically dismantled from the outside in. The physical handshake serves as the ultimate psychological diagnostic tool. The manipulator applies a highly calibrated amount of downward pressure, testing the structural integrity of the victim's personal boundaries. A dominant grip wrapped completely in the velvet glove of warmth establishes a silent hierarchy without triggering any internal alarms, securing the upper hand before negotiations even commence. Once physical contact establishes this highly artificial baseline of deep comfort, the manipulator deploys the deceptive psychological technique known as mirroring, reflecting the victim's exact body language flawlessly. When the exhausted prey leans forward in a moment of sheer vulnerability, the predator leans forward in precisely the exact same manner, creating a highly deceptive illusion of shared, profound struggle. This deliberate physical synchronization hacks the human brain's deepest and oldest empathic networks, forcing the blind victim to instinctively perceive a hostile threat, as a fiercely loyal and implicitly trusted close ally. The modern corporate environment purposefully strips away our most natural biological survival instincts, replacing ancient primal warnings with the blinding and completely sterile fluorescent lights of a thoroughly artificial and inescapable hierarchy. Watch carefully how the predator tilts their head in feigned, deep, and genuine interest, exposing their neck to simulate ultimate vulnerability and pure harmlessness, while secretly mapping the optimal angle of a future attack. They subtly lower their voice to a conspiratorial and deeply hushed whisper, dragging the unsuspecting target into an isolated and highly intimate auditory bubble, effectively cutting them off from the protective safety of the herd. In this isolated psychological chamber, the concept of truth becomes entirely fluid. Every shared frustration is carefully documented and systematically filed away in a mental ledger, destined to be weaponized in the very near future. The desperate victim believes they have finally found a completely safe harbor, a rare sympathetic ear hidden within a ruthlessly cold and highly competitive machine, completely blind to the silent sharpening of the executioner's blade. But establishing this initial physical and psychological connection is merely the prologue to the nightmare. The true and devastating mental vivisection requires the extraction of your darkest secrets, a highly surgical process that is about to begin right now. Trust is the cheapest currency for a predator, heavily traded to purchase immediate access to the most guarded vaults of human vulnerability. The creation of a false sanctuary requires extreme precision, a highly calculated withdrawal from the herd, isolating the target physically and completely psychologically. They slowly guide the prey into a silent corner, constructing an invisible and highly restrictive boundary, separating them entirely from the collective safety net. Notice how the manipulator strategically lowers their own defenses, offering a completely fabricated minor fake confession, to trigger the powerful biological instinct of deep reciprocity. The vivid crimson tie is subtly and casually loosened, projecting an engineered illusion of deep fatigue, tricking the empathetic target into a dangerous false comfort. This artificial display of weakness is highly contagious, forcing the brain into deep induced relaxation, completely disarming their natural and deeply ingrained analytical skepticism. The deeply exhausted target drops their final remaining shields, feeling an overwhelming rush of profound camaraderie, utterly blind to the cold calculation behind the human mask. To further solidify this entirely manufactured psychological bond, actively validating the victim's unspoken hidden grievances, mirroring their silent anger back as profound and genuine empathy. Every single nod and deeply sympathetic low vocalization acting as a digital key unlocking minds, granting unrestricted access to their deepest and darkest professional insecurities. The psychological barriers crumble under the weight of false understanding, allowing highly toxic, fabricated narratives to infiltrate, laying the absolute groundwork for future extreme mental sabotage. The exhausted prey begins to speak with fatal honesty, pouring accumulated frustrations into a bottomless void, mistakenly believing they are finally being genuinely and deeply heard. They freely share their most intimate professional doubts, handing over the blueprints to psychological destruction, while the silent hunter meticulously memorizes every single vulnerable detail. What feels like a deeply profound moment of human connection, executing a highly tactical, ruthless data extraction, processing emotional pain strictly as highly valuable corporate leverage. In this meticulously engineered vacuum of total false safety, deploying a seemingly harmless and gentle question, designed specifically to extract highly lethal and immediately actionable intelligence. The trap mechanism firmly clicks into its final position, willingly handing over the fully loaded weapon, and the invisible psychological slaughter is now completely and utterly inevitable. The most dangerous interrogation never involves bright lights. It begins with a deeply comforting whisper, making the victim feel completely and utterly understood. Observe the tactical use of the pregnant pause, an engineered silence creating immense psychological discomfort, forcing the prey to instinctively fill the dangerous void. The victim rushes to break the oppressive silence, spilling sensitive details about their deep frustrations, practically handing the executioner a fully sharpened blade. A covert nod encourages the flow of lethal information, validating their deeply hidden and powerful resentment, while the predator mentally catalogs every single exploitable flaw. They subtly echo the victim's exact phrasing, creating a completely fabricated sense of alignment, solidifying the absolute illusion of a shared, treacherous battle. This technique is known as targeted emotional amplification, fanning the tiny sparks into an inferno, while carefully keeping their own hands completely, perfectly clean. Notice how the manipulator's eyes remain totally static, tracking the outburst with cold reptilian calculation, completely disconnected from the fiery empathy they actively project. The crimson tie serves as a visual anchor, drawing the victim to a false center, distracting them from the deeply calculating and merciless stare. Every grievance shared is immediately repackaged and weaponized, transforming a momentary lapse into permanent leverage, securely stored in the predator's vast mental ledger. They ask for highly specific and incriminating names, framing the question as a harmless curiosity, when it is actually a highly targeted covert assassination plot. The victim names a powerful superior in confidence, crossing a highly dangerous and fatal line, effectively signing their own professional and brutal death warrant. A microscopic twitch of the zygomatic major muscle, betraying a fleeting moment of sadistic joy as the ultimate and deadly prize is finally secured. The trap is now fully baited and heavily loaded. The gathered data is prepared for deployment, aimed directly at the victim's highly exposed, vulnerable flank. They slowly lean back into the deep shadows, withdrawing the false warmth and manufactured safety, leaving the target deeply exposed and completely dangerously alone. The extraction phase concludes with a final reassuring touch, planting a lethal kiss of death, before they turn to face the completely unsuspecting corporate herd. Every shared frustration becomes a loaded weapon, meticulously stored within the dark mental ledger, waiting patiently for the perfect execution moment. The defining moment of absolute psychological betrayal happens exactly when the naive victim turns, exposing their completely unguarded and vulnerable back. Watch the horrific biological mask drop instantly. The fake empathy dissolves into pure calculation, leaving nothing but a cold reptilian stare. The collected secrets are systematically categorized silently, filed away under highly exploitable psychological weaknesses, transforming human pain into raw corporate currency. An intricate web of lethal office politics is spun directly from fragile, stolen trust, tightly wrapping the completely oblivious and grateful prey. The predator effortlessly returns to their workstation, projecting an aura of completely focused dedication, hiding the absolute malice actively brewing underneath. Every keystroke documents a highly distorted truth, twisting the victim's genuine words into poison, meticulously preparing the absolute perfect character assassination. They weave a highly toxic fabricated narrative, carefully mixing tiny facts with massive lies, ensuring the resulting damage is entirely irreversible. The vivid crimson tie reflects the glow of a monitor displaying the lethal ammunition, ready to be fired at point blank. Meanwhile, the victim exhales in profound relief, firmly believing they have secured an ally, while literally digging their own professional grave. The manipulator views this immense tragic irony as the ultimate and deeply satisfying victory, feeding their monstrous and highly destructive hidden narcissism. A subtle micro-expression of pure, deep contempt flashes quickly across the heavily shadowed face, confirming the complete absence of human empathy. They possess an uncanny and chilling ability to entirely compartmentalize horrific psychological emotional abuse, treating complete devastation as a standard procedure. The compiled intelligence is formally heavily packaged, disguised perfectly as a legitimate business concern, awaiting the absolute optimal moment of deployment. The silent corporate hunter now prepares completely, turning their cold gaze towards the boardroom, where the final public slaughter will commence. Betrayal is a meticulously crafted presentation, delivered precisely under the blinding lights of the transparent corporate glass boardroom. The manipulator strides into the sterile arena, immediately seizing the physical tactical high ground, claiming the absolute center of visual authority. Notice the deliberate placement of the hands, fingers steepled to project immense, calculated confidence, dominating the entire psychological energy of the room. They address the highest-ranking corporate authority, leaning forward with an engineered, respectful posture, while subtly maneuvering the invisible strings of control. The stolen intelligence is finally unsealed, repackaged as a deeply concerned professional observation, effectively masking the toxic venom of character assassination. A microscopic, asymmetrical shrug of the shoulders perfectly simulates a tragic but reluctant disclosure, heavily amplifying the devastating impact of the lie. Every vulnerable secret extracted from the victim, precisely deployed as a highly lethal projectile, targeting their professional reputation with absolute ruthless efficiency. The vivid crimson tie flashes sharply, becoming a highly calculated visual hypnotic pendulum, mesmerizing the authority figure into complete, uncritical agreement. They weaponize the specific names mentioned earlier, twisting the context into a massive conspiracy, firmly cementing the victim's inevitable and brutal downfall. Look closely at the manipulator's unblinking eyes, devoid of any genuine human emotional conflict, scanning the room purely to confirm total submission. Outside the soundproof glass walls of power, waiting in complete and totally blind silence, completely unaware that their professional execution has concluded, the predator subtly gestures towards the door, directing collective hostility towards the naive target, orchestrating the herd to attack the isolated prey. The boardroom members synchronize their dark postures, mirroring the predator's highly engineered fake disgust, solidifying the artificial consensus against the absent victim. A devastatingly quiet nod from the superior officially ratifies the deeply toxic, fabricated narrative, sealing the grim fate of the unsuspecting innocent worker. The boardroom doors prepare to finally open, packing away the highly lethal mental ledger, ready to return to the completely oblivious prey. The return to the open floor seems entirely uneventful, a masterclass in projecting complete innocence, hiding the freshly signed corporate death warrant. Notice the sudden shift in the collective spatial dynamics. The herd instinctively pulls physically away, sensing the invisible mark of a doomed outcast. The victim sits in a growing perimeter of silence, entirely unaware of the sudden contamination that their very presence now quietly represents. Physical isolation is the first tangible symptom of destruction, a silent quarantine enforced without words, preparing the target for complete professional erasure. Next comes the effortless theft of deeply hard-earned achievements, seamlessly adopting the victim's finest work, presenting stolen labor with absolute chilling confidence. A stolen project is casually placed upon the desk, the vivid crimson folder catching light, a bloody trophy claimed in broad daylight. The predator claims the intellectual property without any hesitation, erasing the true creator from existence, a flawless execution of brutal corporate piracy. When the confused victim gently attempts to seek clarification, the psychological technique of severe gaslighting is immediately deployed with terrifying practiced precision. The manipulator stares back with absolute and perfect incomprehension, rewriting the established history completely seamlessly, denying facts until the victim doubts reality. A patronizing tilt of the head fakes genuine concern, projecting an aura of deep worry, suggesting the victim's memory is severely failing. This engineered cognitive dissonance creates extreme internal mental chaos, shattering their fundamental trust in themselves, the ultimate goal of any psychological abuser. The victim visibly shrinks under the weight of confusion, clutching their head in silent desperation, trapped inside a highly toxic mental labyrinth. The sharp shadows of the office seem to lengthen, pressing down on the isolated prey, visualizing the crushing weight of induced madness. Look at the predator observing this complete nervous breakdown, standing safely outside the blast radius, observing the devastation with absolute detached curiosity. The final devastating blow is delivered in plain sight. The mask slips to reveal contempt, the infamous dead smile returning with vengeance. The blade feels coldest when held by a friend, driven deeply into the unsuspecting back, while publicly pretending to save their life. The manipulator approaches the target in open daylight, deploying the ultimate darkest psychological reversal, fundamentally shifting the blame onto the victim. They speak loudly enough for the herd, broadcasting highly fabricated and damaging deep concern, ensuring the audience witnesses the manufactured failure. The victim stammers in complete sudden shock, violently struggling to process the immense betrayal, as their carefully built reputation actively bleeds. Notice the manipulator's profoundly calm, open hands, simulating absolute transparency and total innocent helpfulness, while silently tightening the invisible psychological noose. The psychological tactic known specifically as Darvo, entirely reversing the offender and victim roles, leaving the true prey completely socially paralyzed. The vivid crimson tie acts as bait, drawing the attention of the surrounding herd, establishing the predator as the undeniable authority. The herd absorbs the highly toxic narrative, instantly accepting the loud and confident lie over the quiet and confused, undeniable truth. A subtle hand placed upon the shoulder, projecting deep sympathy to the blind audience, while physically pushing the isolated victim downward. The victim's body language totally collapses, curling inward to protect their vital organs, an ancient biological response to overwhelming threat. Meanwhile, the predator absorbs the stolen energy, feeding their deep and endlessly hungry narcissism, standing perfectly tall upon the fresh ruins. They casually offer a highly poisonous solution, presenting a terrible compromise to the herd, effectively forcing the victim into absolute submission. This is the true absolute zero-sum game, where survival requires the complete, utter destruction of another human being's fragile professional sanity. The strike is now flawlessly, completely finished, leaving no visible fingerprints on the weapon, only the devastating psychological wreckage left behind. The predator turns away from the corpse, slipping back into the blind corporate herd, perfectly ready to locate the next target. Realization completely shatters the illusion of safety. The prey finally comprehends the invisible slaughter, as the psychological trap forcefully snaps shut. The initial biological reaction is total paralysis. The nervous system entirely overloads with terror, freezing the victim in absolute silent agony. Observe the involuntary self-soothing physical gestures, hands gripping the arms and fragile neck, attempting to physically hold the shattering mind. The sterile environment suddenly becomes highly hostile. The familiar workspace transforms into a cage, built entirely from weaponized words and stolen secrets. They stare at the empty neighboring chair, the phantom of a completely fake ally, leaving behind nothing but cold, dark emptiness. The manipulated mind begins rapidly replaying memories, searching desperately for the completely missed warnings, finding only the vivid crimson-red coffee cup. Every shared secret now echoes as poison.
The truth is out.
The comforting whispers suddenly mutate into screams, tearing apart their highly fragile professional sanity. The crushing weight of severe cognitive dissonance forces the victim to deeply doubt reality, exactly as the psychological predator meticulously planned. Co-workers walk past like completely blind ghosts. The social quarantine is now fully active, rendering the victim completely invisible and utterly alone. The physical toll manifests in trembling hands. The heart races while breathing grows shallow, a classic panic response to severe psychological trauma. From a safe and completely hidden distance, the hunter calmly watches the absolute devastation, absorbing the chaotic energy like a starving parasite. This profound suffering acts as narcissistic supply, feeding the endless void inside the predator, validating their deeply twisted sense of ultimate superiority. The victim stares at the stolen presentation, recognizing their stolen labor now heavily weaponized, stripped entirely of their name and professional identity. The deepest wound is not the betrayal. It is the complete loss of trust, realizing they willingly opened the door to destruction. They are left as a hollow shell, a perfectly drained and discarded corporate battery, while the pristine, ruthless machine simply grinds onward. The ruthless corporate ecosystem immediately absorbs the fallen, seamlessly replacing the broken biological asset without leaving a single trace behind. The successful predator comfortably returns to calm baseline, exhibiting a highly dangerous, quiet satisfaction, preparing for the next inevitable hunt. To understand the covert narcissist is profoundly chilling. Realizing they operate fundamentally entirely empty, devoid of any genuine emotional core. They perceive the modern office as a battlefield, where another person's complete professional destruction equals their own ultimate absolute survival. The friendly mask is merely a biological tool, meticulously designed to bypass psychological defenses, exactly like a deeply deceptive camouflage. But the human body always betrays the lie, the fake smile failing to reach, the cold and deeply calculating eyes. The vicious cycle begins again with new prey, an almost imperceptible downward vertical scan, perfectly measuring another completely fresh vulnerability. Another naive worker offers a genuine warm greeting, willingly unlocking their highly protected mental vault, inviting the silent, devastating parasite inside. The dark mental ledger simply turns a page, aggressively recording new, profound personal frustrations, preparing the next highly lethal ammunition. The invisible web is cast out once more, spinning lethal traps from pure empathy, thriving exclusively on deeply misplaced human trust. True survival requires abandoning deeply ingrained romantic illusions, recognizing that the perfectly tailored suit often conceals a completely ruthless, silent predator. Ignore the deeply comforting and highly engineered words. Carefully observe the absolute physical baseline, searching for the microscopic emotional disconnect. Watch specifically for the completely frozen upper face, the absolute absence of natural wrinkles, exposing the terrifying hollow emptiness beneath. Trust the ancient and deeply primal biological alarm, that inexplicable sudden drop of temperature when the smile feels completely dead. Because in the heavily shadowed corridors of power, the next highly calculated friendly approach might easily target the next observer.